It is 3:14 in the morning. The air in the lab is stale, smelling of ozone and burnt coffee. The only light comes from the server racks, blinking in a chaotic, hypnotic rhythm, and the central monitor, a wall of 64-inch OLED glass that cost more than my house. For the last 6 months, that screen has shown me nothing but static. Snow, the visual representation of thermal noise, the sound of the universe refusing to speak. But tonight, the snow stopped. Tonight, the chaotic white noise organized itself. It pulled together, pixel by agonizing pixel, until it formed an image. It's grainy. The color saturation is slightly off, leaning too heavily into the blues like an old VHS tape left in the sun. But I can see it. God help me, I can see it clearly. It is a kitchen with yellow backsplash tiles, tiles that we argued about in Home Depot 7 years ago. I wanted white. She wanted something sunny. She won. She always won. And there she is, Sarah. She is standing by the counter. She is wearing that oversized gray sweater, the one with the fraying cuff she refused to throw away. She is alive. She is whole. There is no blood. There is no shattered glass. She is laughing at something someone off-screen just said. She turns, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Steam rises from them, swirling in the morning light of a sun that never rose for me. She walks toward the camera. Or, not the camera. She walks toward the person sitting where the camera would be. A hand reaches out to take the mug. It is my hand. I recognize the scar on the thumb from a soldering iron burn back in grad school. The camera pans just for a second, and I see him. I see me. The other David. He looks tired, but not like I am tired. He looks like a man who stayed up late watching a movie, not a man who hasn't slept in a peaceful bed for 5 years. He takes the coffee. He smiles at her. He touches her cheek. They called it a theory, a mathematical abstraction. The Copenhagen interpretation said the cat is dead or alive. But Hugh Everett whispered a different truth in 1957. He said the cat is dead and alive, but they are separated by the walls of reality. He said that every choice creates a branching timeline, a new world. Looking at her face right now, watching the rise and fall of her chest as she breathes air that I cannot breathe, I know the truth. The math wasn't an abstraction. It was a map. The many worlds are real, and I am in the wrong one. To understand how I broke the universe, you have to understand that I didn't start this experiment to find a ghost. I started it to prove that ghosts are mathematically impossible. My name is David Aris. 5 years ago, I was a tenured professor of quantum mechanics at MIT. I had a wife named Sarah, a golden retriever named Buster, and a future that looked like a straight, predictable line. Then came the rain. Then came the hydroplane on I-95. Then came the tree. In this universe, the one you and I are inhabiting right now, the physics of friction failed me. The tires lost grip for exactly 0.4 seconds. The car spun. The impact occurred on the passenger side. I walked away with a broken rib and a concussion. Sarah didn't walk away at all. Grief is a strange thing. For a baker, grief might look like burned bread. For a writer, it looks like a blank page. But for a physicist, grief looks like an equation that doesn't balance. I became obsessed with the why. Not the spiritual why. I had no use for gods who would allow such things, but the mechanical why. Why did the tires slip then? Why not a second later? Why not a second earlier? I dove into the archives of Hugh Everett III. The man was mocked in his time, ridiculed for suggesting that our reality is constantly splitting like a fractal. He drank himself to death, ignored by the scientific community. But as I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the silence of a life interruptus, his words began to look less like science fiction and more like salvation. Everett suggested that the wave function never collapses. When the car spun, the universe didn't choose an outcome. It performed all outcomes. In one branch, I died. In one branch, we both died. In one branch, the car missed the tree entirely. I lost my tenure. They said I was unstable. They said I was using pseudoscience to cope with trauma. They were right about the trauma, but they were wrong about the science. I liquidated my assets. I sold the house with the yellow tiles. I moved into an industrial warehouse in the sensory deprivation of the Nevada desert. I built the interferometer not to look at stars, but to look at the space between them. I wanted to detect the decoherence patterns, the friction between our reality and the ones right next door. I wanted to hear the hum of the road not taken. I didn't expect to find a window. I didn't expect the video feed to stabilize. But now, the machine is humming. The cooling fans are screaming like jet engines. And on the screen, the other David is finishing his coffee. He is leaning in to kiss Sarah. I am paralyzed. My hand is hovering over the abort switch. If I turn it off, she disappears back into the void. If I keep it on, I am violating the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. So, before I tell you what happened next, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with yourself. Question: if you found a window to a parallel universe where your life was perfect, where the person you loved was still holding your hand, would you be able to just watch, or would you try to break through? Answer watch or break in the comments below. Because what I did, well, let's just say that observation is not a passive act. When you look at the universe looks back. Subscribe and join me in the dark, because the feed is still running, and something is beginning to change in the pixelation. I spent the first hour running diagnostics. I checked the code, I checked the buffer, I checked for malware, for hacks, for some cruel prank played by a graduate student who wanted to break the crazy professor. A logical mind refuses to accept a miracle. It looks for the wires. It looks for the trap. But there were no wires. The data stream was coming from the interferometer's focal point, a singularity of information pulled from the quantum foam. The timestamp on the video feed wasn't from 5 years ago. It was from today. It was from right now. I saw the calendar hanging on their refrigerator. It was a local mechanics calendar, the kind with vintage cars on it. The month was October. The year was current. That was the moment my knees gave out. I didn't fall. I just sank. I slid down the front of the server rack until I hit the concrete floor, my eyes locked on the screen above me. I watched her make toast. It sounds so small, doesn't it? To make toast. But you have to understand, I haven't seen her perform a small, meaningless action in 1,826 days. I have only seen her in frozen photographs, or in the terrifying loops of my own nightmares where the car spins and never stops. But here, she was scraping burnt crust off a slice of sourdough into the sink. She was humming. I couldn't hear the song yet. The audio feed was still just a wash of white noise, but I knew the rhythm. It was Here Comes the Sun. She always hummed that when the weather was turning cold. I crawled back to the console. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I managed to isolate the audio frequency. I filtered out the static. I boosted the vocal range. And then, the room filled with a sound that hit me harder than the airbag ever did. Her voice. David? Did you remember to call the insurance company about the gutter? It was so clear. It was so painfully mundane. In my world, the insurance company calls me to discuss life expectancy tables and payouts. In that world, they were just worried about a leaky gutter. I watched the other David walk into the frame. He was wearing a shirt I owned, a blue button-down I had donated to Goodwill 3 years ago in a fit of purging. He looked annoyed. I'll do it tomorrow, Sarah. I'm running late, he said. He grabbed an apple. He didn't kiss her. He just walked out of the frame. I shouted at the screen. I screamed at the empty lab. Kiss her, you idiot! Look at her! She's right there! But he couldn't hear me. He got into his car, the car that wasn't wrapped around a tree in his world, and he drove away. That was the first night. I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, watching Sarah read a book for 3 hours. I watched her fold laundry. I watched her nap on the couch with Buster, our dog, who had died of old age in my world 2 years ago. Seeing the dog was a secondary heartbreak I wasn't prepared for. By dawn, I had mapped the divergence point. In quantum mechanics, we talk about the butterfly effect, but that's too poetic. It's more like a switch on a railroad track. 5 years ago, on the night of November 12th, it was raining. In my world, I decided to take the scenic route home, down Old Mill Road, because I wanted to show Sarah the autumn leaves. That was the road with the slick patch. That was the road with the tree. In the world on the screen, the other David had been tired. He had taken the highway. He got home 10 minutes earlier. They ordered Thai food. They watched a movie. They went to bed. That one decision, that one tiny electrical impulse in my brain that said, turn left instead of go straight. That was the difference between a life of solitary confinement and a life of warmth. It started as research. That's what I told myself. I needed to document the stability of the Einstein-Rosen bridge I had inadvertently created. I needed to monitor the power consumption. But by the end of the first week, it had become an addiction. I stopped going home to my apartment. I slept on a cot in the lab. I stopped eating regular meals. I survived on protein bars and instant coffee, consuming them only when the other David and Sarah were eating. It felt communal. If they were having spaghetti, I would boil pasta on a hot plate. If they were drinking wine, I would pour a glass of cheap whiskey. I became a ghost haunting my own life. I learned their routine better than I knew my own. They woke up at 6:30. Sarah left for her architectural firm at 7:45. Other David went to the university. He still had his tenure, of course, at 8. When the house was empty, I felt a profound loneliness, even though I was technically alone in the lab the entire time. I would zoom the camera in on the details of the house, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams, the pile of mail on the counter. I read their bills. I knew their bank balance. I knew that they were trying to have a baby, and that they were struggling. That was a knife twist I didn't expect. I watched them have quiet, tense arguments in the kitchen. I saw Sarah crying while looking at a negative test result. I wanted to reach through the screen. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to tell her that it didn't matter, that just being alive was enough, that just breathing was a miracle she couldn't comprehend. But the other David? He was distant. He was stressed about grant money. He was stressed about faculty politics. I started to hate him. I hated him because he was me, but a lesser version of me. He was soft. He hadn't been forged in the fire of loss. He didn't know the value of what he held in his hands. He treated Sarah like a fixture in his life, something that would always be there. I found myself whispering to the screen, coaching him, put down the phone, look at her, ask her how her day was. And then the decay started. It began on the 12th day. I was watching them watch television. Suddenly, the image smeared. It wasn't digital pixelation, it was fluid, like wet paint running down a canvas. The colors bled. Sarah's face melted into the couch for a split second before snapping back. I checked the equipment. The heat sinks were glowing cherry red. The power draw had spiked by 300%. But it wasn't just the machine. I looked at my own hand. For a moment, just a heartbeat, my hand looked translucent. I could see the grain of the desk through my skin. I blinked, and it was solid again. I ran to the whiteboard. I started calculating the entropy exchange. The math was terrifying. The many worlds theory relies on the idea that the branches are separate. They cannot interact. By observing them, by entangling a consciousness from branch A with the reality of branch B, I was creating a bridge. But bridges have weight limits. I was creating quantum drag. My observation was acting like a parasitic load on their reality. The more I watched, the more energy I leached from their timeline to sustain the connection to mine. And nature abhors a vacuum. If I kept watching, I wasn't just observing their world, I was slowly erasing it. The glitches on the screen got worse. Objects in their house would shift when no one was looking. A vase on the mantel fell and shattered for no reason. Sarah jumped, looking around the room, terrified. "David," she called out in the video. Did you feel that? The other David looked up from his papers. Feel what? It felt like the air pressure dropped. Like someone walked over my grave. She looked right at the camera. She looked right at me. I should have turned it off. Any ethical scientist would have severed the connection immediately. I was endangering them. I was destabilizing the local reality of a parallel universe. But I couldn't do it. I was starving, and she was the only food in the world. Instead of turning it off, I did the unthinkable. I ramped up the power. I reinforced the signal. I wanted to stabilize the image. I needed to see her clearly. And that's when the idea formed. A dark, seductive, impossible idea. If I was already connected, if the bridge was already built, why just watch? The other David was unhappy. He was ungrateful. He was wasting the life I would kill to have. What if I could trade places? What if I could push him out and take the life that was supposed to be mine? I reached for the keyboard. I began to write a code, not to receive a signal, but to send one. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Sleep is for people who live in a single, stable reality. I was living in 2, and one of them required constant maintenance. The modification was simple in theory, impossible in practice. An interferometer splits light. It takes a single beam, divides it, sends it down 2 different paths, and brings it back together. If the paths are identical, the light recombines perfectly. If they are different, you get interference. You get a pattern. I realized that consciousness is just another form of light. It's bioelectrical energy. It's data. And if I could modulate the frequency of the machine to match the frequency of my own brain waves, the specific neural signature of David Aris, I could do more than just receive. I could transmit. I started small. I typed a text message on my terminal. Buy her flowers. I hit enter. The room hummed. The lights in my lab flickered, and the smell of ozone became so thick I could taste copper on my tongue. On the screen, in the other world, the other David was driving home. Suddenly, his car radio glitched. The music stopped. A high-pitched whine tore through the speakers. He winced, clutching his head. Then, for a split second, the digital display on his dashboard didn't show the time. It didn't show the radio station. It flashed. Buy flowers. He slammed on the brakes. The car behind him honked, swerving to miss him. He sat there, hyperventilating, staring at the dashboard. The message was gone. It was 5:15 p.m. again. Jesus, he whispered. I need to get my eyes checked. But he did it. He stopped at a florist. He bought a bouquet of lilies. When he walked into the house, Sarah's face lit up. She looked at him with a tenderness that broke my heart all over again. She hugged him. What's the occasion? She asked. Just thought of you, he stammered. He lied. He didn't think of her. I thought of her. I bought those flowers. He was just the delivery boy. He was the puppet, and I had just found the strings. That success was the most dangerous drug I have ever tasted. It validated everything. It proved that the barrier wasn't a wall. It was a membrane. And membranes can be permeated. I escalated. I stopped suggesting. I started commanding. I calibrated the feed to sync with his REM cycles. When he slept, I whispered into the microphone. I fed him my memories. I fed him the pain of the accident. I wanted him to wake up terrified of losing her, so he would appreciate keeping her. But the universe pushes back. Newton's third law applies to metaphysics too. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The other, David started to get sick. He lost weight. He developed a tremor in his left hand, the same hand I had burned years ago. He started having nosebleeds at dinner. And my world began to dissolve. The walls of my lab started to lose their texture. The concrete floor felt spongy, like walking on moss. Shadows moved in directions that didn't align with the light sources. I would look at a wrench on my desk and it would be a hammer. I would blink and it would be a wrench again. I was leaking reality. I was pouring so much of my existence into his vessel that I was emptying my own. But I didn't care. I was winning. I could see the change in him. He was becoming more like me. He was becoming attentive, paranoid, protective. He held Sarah's hand so tight at the movies that she complained he was hurting her. Then came the night of the breach. It was their anniversary. The anniversary of the day we met. In my world, I spend this day getting drunk in the dark. In his world, they were getting dressed for dinner. He was standing in front of the bathroom mirror tying his tie. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man haunted. I was sitting at my console, sweating, my heart rate at a dangerous 140 beats per minute. I had the power output at maximum. The cooling warnings were screaming on my monitors, red lights flashing in a panic. I ignored them. I locked onto his reflection in the mirror. "Look at me," I whispered into the mic. "Look at me, you ungrateful bastard." On the screen, the other David froze. He stared at his own reflection. Then I did it. I pushed my consciousness into the stream. I didn't just send a voice, I sent will. The other David's reflection changed. He was wearing a blue tie. But in the mirror, his reflection was wearing no tie. His reflection looked unkempt, wild-eyed, unshaven. His reflection was me. He gasped, stumbling back against the towel rack. "Sarah!" he screamed. "Sarah!" I leaned into the mic. My voice boomed through the speakers of his reality, not as a sound, but as a vibration in the air itself. "She can't help you, David. She deserves better. She deserves someone who knows what it means to lose her." The bathroom began to warp. The tiles, the yellow tiles I hated, started to breathe. The grout melted into black liquid. The mirror cracked, a spiderweb fracture originating from where my eyes met his. Sarah ran into the room. "David, what's happening?" She looked at him. Then she looked at the mirror. And she screamed. Because she didn't see her husband's reflection. She saw a monster. She saw a man made of static and grief, a man whose face was contorted with a jealousy so potent it was radioactive. "Who is that?" she shrieked, backing away. "David, who is that in the mirror?" "It's me," he cried, grabbing her shoulders. "It's just a hallucination. I'm sick, Sarah, I'm sick." "No!" I shouted. My voice tore through the fabric of their world, shaking the toothbrush holder off the wall. "He's the hallucination. I am the constant. I am the one who remembers." The feed began to tear. The image on my screen fractured into kaleidoscopic shards. I saw Sarah's face twist in horror, but not at him, at the air, at the invisible pressure that was crushing the room. The sky outside their window turned a violent, bruising purple. The physics of their world were collapsing under the weight of two observers occupying the same coordinate point. "Get out!" the other. David screamed at the empty air. He grabbed a heavy glass vase and hurled it at the mirror. The mirror shattered. My screen went black for a second. Then it strobed back on. But the angle was wrong. The camera, the viewpoint, was on the floor. I was looking up at the ceiling. Gravity had failed. Water from the shower was floating in perfect spheres. Sarah was hovering 3 feet off the ground, clutching the door frame, screaming soundlessly. The other David was pinned to the wall by an invisible force, his face purple, gasping for air. I wasn't merging with him. I was killing him. I was killing both of them. I had tried to open a window, but I had broken the hull of the ship, and the void was rushing in. "Let go!" the other David wheezed. His eyes rolled back, locking onto the point in space where I was watching. "Please, you're killing her." I looked at Sarah. Blood was trickling from her nose. Her skin was graying. She was suffocating because I was stealing the air from her timeline to breathe in mine. I just wanted to see her. I wept. My hands hovered over the controls. I just wanted to be with her. "You are killing her!" he screamed. The sound distorted, demonic. "If you love her, Let her go! My hand trembled over the emergency shutdown. But shutdown wasn't enough. The bridge was self-sustaining now. The energies had looped. Even if I cut the power, the entanglement would persist until their reality was consumed by the vacuum of mine. There was only one way to break the connection. One way to seal the breach. I had to destroy the anchor. I looked around my lab, the equipment, the servers, the weeks of work. And then I looked at myself. I wasn't just the observer. I was the antenna. My mind was the signal. As long as I was conscious, as long as I was desiring that world, the door would stay open. I grabbed the heavy wrench from the workbench, the one that had flickered into a hammer earlier. On the screen, Sarah's eyes were fluttering closed. She was dying, again, and this time it wasn't a wet road. It was me. I was the tree. I was the impact. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't aim for the machine. The machine was just metal. I raised the wrench. I didn't bring the wrench down on my own skull. That would have been too easy. That would have been an escape. And I didn't deserve an escape. I deserved the silence." I swung the wrench into the center of the interferometer's glass core. The sound was deafening. It wasn't just the sound of shattering glass and twisting metal. It was the sound of a hurricane suddenly vanishing into a vacuum. The liquid nitrogen cooling loop ruptured, hissing like a dying snake, filling the room with a freezing white fog. The screen flickered. For 1 microsecond, a fraction of a moment that felt like an eternity, I saw them one last time. Gravity had returned. The water fell back to the floor. The other David collapsed, gasping, catching himself on the sink. Sarah fell into his arms, sobbing, terrified, but alive. The color was returning to her cheeks. The purple bruising of the sky outside their window vanished, replaced by the gentle, indifferent gray of a rainy twilight. They were safe. Then the capacitors blew. A shower of sparks rained down on me, stinging my skin, burning holes in my lab coat. The monitor imploded. The connection was severed. The hum stopped. The screaming fans stopped. The terrible, seductive whisper of the multiverse fell silent. I sat there in the wreckage, surrounded by broken glass and the smell of electrical fire, shivering in the artificial cold of the nitrogen fog. I waited for the grief to return. I waited for the crushing weight of my own reality to break me again. But it didn't. Because for the first time in 5 years, I knew. I didn't just hope. I knew. She is out there. She is making coffee. She is complaining about the gutter. She is annoyed that the dog tracked mud onto the carpet. She is laughing at a bad joke. She is warm. She is breathing. I am not with her. I will never be with her. I am the man in the dark, and she is the woman in the light. And that is how the equation must balance. We think of the many worlds theory as a promise of abundance. We think it means there are infinite versions of us, living infinite dreams. We think it means that death is not the end. But we forget the cost of that abundance. If every choice creates a new world, then every choice is also an act of isolation. To turn left is to forever separate yourself from the version of you who turned right. We are not meant to straddle the divide. We are not meant to peer through the keyhole. Decoherence, the process that separates these quantum states, isn't a flaw in the universe. It isn't a wall to be broken down. It is an immune system. It is there to protect us. It protects the integrity of our joy by sealing it away from the rot of our regret. It protects the living from the hunger of the grieving. I looked at the black, broken screen of the monitor. My reflection was there, dim, distorted by the cracks, barely visible in the emergency lighting. I looked old. I looked alone. But I didn't look like a monster anymore. I stood up. My knees popped. My back ached. I kicked a piece of the destroyed processor across the floor. I walked over to the hot plate. I found the jar of instant coffee. It was stale. It was bitter. I boiled water in a dirty mug. I drank it. It tasted terrible. It tasted real. This is my world. This is the world where the tires slipped. This is the world where the tree stood firm. This is the world where I have to wake up every single day and learn how to carry the empty space beside me. But it is my world, and I will not poison anyone else's just to escape it. I walked out of the lab. I walked out into the desert night. The air was cold and dry. The stars were out, millions of them, burning in the silence of the vacuum. Up there, around every single one of those stars, there might be planets. And on those planets, there might be choices. And from those choices, infinite branches. 1,000,000,000,000 tragedies. 1,000,000,000,000 miracles. I looked up at the vast, uncaring canopy of the cosmos. "Goodbye, Sarah," I whispered. The wind took the words. It didn't offer them back. And that is exactly how it should be. The experiment is over. The data has been destroyed. The machine is a pile of scrap metal that I will sell by the pound to pay for a therapist. But the question remains. The question I asked you at the start. If you could see the life you lost, if you could open that window, would you be strong enough to close it? Most of us think we would break the glass. We think that love justifies the breach. We think that we are entitled to the happiness we missed out on. But David's story teaches us a brutal lesson in quantum ethics. To observe a thing is to change it. To covet a life that isn't yours is to introduce entropy into a system that cannot sustain it. We are all walking through a garden of forking paths. Every day, you make a choice that kills 1,000 other futures. You chose to click on this video. In another branch, you scrolled past. In another branch, you're asleep. In another branch, you don't exist at all. Don't mourn the branches that withered. Don't look for the ghosts of what might have been. Water the branch you are standing on. It is the only one that can hold your weight. Every choice you make creates a ghost, Everett might have said, if he were more of a poet and less of a physicist. Be kind to them, but do not let them into your house. This channel is dedicated to the science of the human condition, to the philosophy of our drama. If this story made you look at your own life a little differently, if it made you appreciate the mundane, boring, imperfect reality you are breathing in right now, then do me a favor. Hit the like button. It creates a data point in the algorithm that tells this timeline we are doing something right. Subscribe to explore the multiverse with us. And until next time, keep your eyes on the road.